Guys, I'm not gonna lie. This show has 3 seasons, each with 10 episodes, so that's 30 episodes total. And each episode stems from at least 20 to 30 minutes long. With that being said, I think I've watched this show about 7 or 8 times. Hello everyone, this is Darren at GNB Productions, and today we are concluding our admittedly small celebration of the Halloween season with the latest and my favorite entry into my favorite horror movie franchise, Evil Dead, with the TV series Ash vs. Evil Dead. Ash vs. Evil Dead released in 2015 and lasted all the way to 2018, so it's still pretty fresh in my mind, especially since Raimi and Campbell confirmed recently that there is another Evil Dead movie in the works. So for this review, I'll be covering each season individually and giving my thoughts on each one and see how the show varies as a whole. Starting with Season 1. Season 1 picks up 30 years after the events of Evil Dead 2, and Army of Darkness. As we see, Ash hasn't been doing jack except for one very important thing, keeping the Necronomicon under lock and key. That is until one night he got high with this random girl and read the book out loud in an attempt to impress her. Yeah, if Army of Darkness taught us anything about Ash, it's that, he's not always that smart. So, Ash, as well as his new allies, Kelly and Pablo, have to band together in order to rid the evil from Earth once again. Now, first off, about the cast. Everyone who plays a Deadite in this show is amazing. I cannot give enough credit to those who gave it their all in these performances. They're just freaking fantastic. Now, in this first season, we are introduced to 3 mainstays for the duration of the entire show. So I'll talk about them first and then get into the side pieces, starting with the central antagonist, Ruby, played oh so brilliantly by Lucy Lawless. Ruby in this season is played super ambiguously, and that may be due to her addition being a little later into the rough draft, so they didn't have her all the way figured out. She was introduced as Ruby Nobi, the sister of Annie Nobi from the second movie. I originally liked how her role played back into the second movie, but as it goes on, it's no secret that there's more to her than she's letting on. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but nevertheless, I liked how it was told, and I especially love how her story continues in the following seasons. Next is Kelly, played by Dana DiLorenzo. She is the rationalist in Ash's team who joins for the sole sake of taking out the rage of losing her parents to the evil by killing Deadites. But as the show goes on, you start to notice the new type of family relationship she forms with Ash and Pablo. And as we go on, we see what she'll do to keep them safe and to keep on battling the evil. And finally, we have my favorite character besides Ash, Pablo Bolivar, played by Ray Santiago. Pablo is the lovable, naive sidekick of the group, and I don't mean that in a way to put him down, but as a way to highlight where he ends up by the end of the series. Pablo was already well-established friends with Ash before he released the evil, but afterwards, he is someone that sticks by his side every step of the way. He starts off cowardly, but later evolves into someone as, if not just as cool as Ash himself. Speaking of which, Ash, played by Bruce Campbell. Now, I don't have to say much, but after 20 years of Campbell being absent from this role, you reasonably have to question if he'll be as good or even better than he was the last time he played him. And to that I say, he far surpasses his previous performances as Ash.
I need your help.
Oh, you need my help. Okay, first of all, screw you and your ugly-ass kids. Here's what I need. I need to be back in Jacksonville on my second keg of beer, putting my spicy man meat into a mother-daughter sandwich. That's what I need.
There's a sense of drama to the character as the series goes on, making us feel more and more sorry for him that the evil has plagued his life and constantly takes away the people he cares about. One of the show's highlights in itself are Ash, Kelly, and Pablo. All 3 characters play off of each other so well, to the point that whenever I think of Evil Dead, I don't just think of Ash anymore. I think of all 3 of these guys working together as this surprisingly well-balanced and orchestrated unit. Okay, now for the finale. We return to where it all started back at the cabin, and the set design captured the scenery brilliantly. They did an amazing job at recreating such an iconic horror location. And 2, we finally get the reveal as we see Ruby was revealed to be the very being who wrote the Necronomicon itself.
I wrote this book.
This season established this specific group of beings known as the Dark Ones, and Ruby betrayed them to gain ultimate power all on her own. This show gives us a lot of interesting lore, and this is an example of one that I just love. Sadly enough, we never get to see a full-on fight between Ash and Ruby during the series, even though literally everyone was begging for it. This season perfectly shows Ash's character growth, with him not caring about anyone or anything except saving Pablo and Kelly, no matter how dumb or drastic the decision may be. Now, this season as a whole was really good. It does what any first season of a show should do. It prepares you for the type of feel this show will have and does a really good job at keeping you invested all throughout. And it also gives us a lot of cool subtle story details that can be further developed and expressed upon in later seasons. Now, let's hurry up and jump into what is personally my favorite season of this show, Season 2. Season 2 picks up 2 months later, with Ruby losing control over her demonic spawn, losing her immortality in the process. In a last-ditch effort to escape them, and to make sure they don't get their hands on the Necronomicon, she summons some Deadites to let Ash aware of her presence, so he, Kelly, and Pablo can provide some assistance. They then venture over to Ruby, who has been keeping refuge in Elk Grove, Michigan, Ash's hometown, and the setting for the show going forward. Once they get there, they encounter another problem, though. It turns out the reason Ash left Elk Grove was because he was ran out of town for people thinking he went crazy and killed all of his friends back at the cabin 30 years ago. So now, they have to deal with Deadites and the distrust of the townsfolk. This season adds 4 new additions to the cast. First, Ash's best friend Chet, played by Ted Raimi, who you may or may not recognize from Army of Darkness. Ash's dad, Brock Williams, played by Lee Majors, and he is absolutely perfect for this role. He is as raunchy, disrespectful, and hilarious as you'd expect the father of Ash Williams to be. Then we have Linda, Ash's new love interest, played by Michelle Hurd. She is really well played and has really good comedic timing, but strangely didn't leave a huge impression on me by the end of the season, and was strangely absent in Season 3. And last but not least, this season's main villain, Ball, played by Joel Tobeck. And here's where we get into why exactly Ruby's spawn turned on her. It was because they were trying to gain the Necronomicon to summon Ball into the human world. Ball is my favorite part of this show, and a big reason why Season 2 is my favorite. Ball is a less is more kind of villain. He does have the usual demon powers, but doesn't use them in favor of his mind manipulation over others. And not just that, he can also jump into the body of any of his victims, upping the threat level and paranoia amongst our characters. The best showing of this is in the episode where Ball traps Ash in an asylum in the hopes of being able to mentally break him so that he will willingly give the Necronomicon to him. Speaking of which, let's talk about Pablo for a second. Ever since Season 1, Pablo has had a weird connection to the Necronomicon, to the point where he in a way becomes the book itself and gains the knowledge of all of its incantations, including the one to send Ball back to the demon world. This is only a precursor to the type of role Pablo will have in the near future. Now, one thing that took me by surprise was seeing Pablo die. I said spoiler alert, didn't I? But it's fine. They travel back to the 1980s to stop Ash from ever reading the Necronomicon. Now, for the finale, here's where this season, and the rest of the show for that matter, gets a little weird. You'd assume that if anything drastic were to happen in the past, it would alter the future in a dramatic way. But they destroyed the cabin and everything is exactly the same when they go back to the present. But other than that, this finale is so cool that I honestly don't care. It has everything. Ash and Ball getting into a dual chainsaw battle. It has a rematch between Ash and Henrietta. It even has Ruby meeting the 80s version of herself in the past. This is just pure insanity. This season was, in my opinion, really better than the first one. We have a more established team dynamic with Ash, Kelly, and Pablo, and the stakes in this season feel a whole lot more personal. It's not just about Ash fighting the evil. It's also about him gaining the trust of Elk Grove and reconciling with the people that he left. Ash in this season is the most human, seeing him truly care for his friends and family, and we get a deeper dive into his psyche, and I really appreciate that. Now, let's go ahead and hop into the final season. 3 years after Season 2, Ruby has been hunting for the Necronomicon while Ash and Pablo have been keeping up shop in Elk Grove, while Kelly has been MIA fighting evil alongside the Knights of Samaria, an ancient group who helped Ash fight the evil all the way back in Army of Darkness. Ruby's new plan is to give birth to another evil Ash, because it turns out if something were to happen to the Promised One, the next in the bloodline would have to take their place as the new Promised One. And if Ruby has control over the Necronomicon and the Promised One, she will become more powerful than the Dark Ones. But there's one slight mix-up. If Ash were to die, the evil Ash wouldn't become the next Promised One. That would be Brandy, Ash's newly discovered daughter, played by Ariel Carver O'Neill. For some reason, I feel like I'm pronouncing that wrong. I don't know why. Now, this is something I'm divided on. First off, seeing Ash trying to be a legitimate father towards Brandy is the most charming and wholesome part of this whole franchise. Instead of doing the whole give terrible person a child to teach them about responsibility trope we see in certain media, Ash is still very much Ash, it's just now he has a kid to look after. But Brandy herself is where I'm a bit stuck. Throughout the entire season, she is the most annoying and insufferable part of this entire show, and every time she opened her mouth, she literally pissed me off. It was only until the second to last episode where she has to go through all of what Ash went through back at the cabin and in Army of Darkness when I really started to like her. But that's the issue. The second to last episode of the entire show is when I started to like her, and that's a little disappointing. Don't get me wrong, she is perfectly casted and acted in this role, but the writing about her when it came for me to legit start to care about her came up a little bit too short. Now, moving on to the other characters. Kelly joining the Knights of Samaria is really cool, but I wish it was further expanded upon. Like, have Dalton be one of the descendants of Sheila from Army of Darkness. That could have been a really cool way to tie her back into the story, but they all ended up as just useless cannon fodder. Pablo gets what is literally the best character shift in this entire franchise. He meets his Uncle Brujo in the Dreamscape and claims his newfound Brujo Especial powers, basically making Pablo one with the human world and one with the demon world. This is one of the reasons I'm so angry this show got cancelled, because it would have been really cool to see Pablo grow and understand these new powers, as well as seeing Brandy being the new Promised One. This is probably the best Lucy Lawless has ever portrayed Ruby. She plays the villain role perfectly, and to prove that, she even goes as far as killing Kelly, but not before having a pretty cool fight scene. Here's another cool thing that gets introduced. It turns out that if your soul was taken by the evil, you get sent to this demonic purgatory landscape. But here's an idea. Wouldn't it have been cool to see Annie Nobi down here? I mean, she was killed by the Kandarian dagger. And wouldn't it have been cool to see that all these years later she has some type of, I don't know, defenses against the demon that's down here killing everybody? It would have been a cool callback to, you know, tie Season 2 back into this, but, you know, it's cool if it didn't happen. It's just a thought. Anyway, Ash brings Kelly's soul back, but unfortunately the rift was open long enough for the Dark Ones to escape and awaken Kandar the Destroyer, the demon that was destined for the Promised One to battle. Now, Ash being told that he has to kill the most powerful demon alive, he understandably has a mental breakdown, and Bruce Campbell's performance is freaking amazing in this scene. But he later accepts and goes off to fight Kandar, but not before saying goodbye to his loved ones. Yeah, I watched this episode 2 years ago, and I'm not gonna lie, I did start to get a little teary-eyed. The thing that hit me the hardest was Ash saying this one line.
Pablo, you're the Jefe now.
Out of context, like, you wouldn't get it, but if you've seen the show, you know exactly how hard that hit. So, Ash defeats Kandar and nearly dies in the process, but he was luckily saved by the Knights of Samaria and wakes up in an apocalyptic future ravaged by the Dark Ones, and Ash gears up to lay waste. I'm going a little off script for this part here, but yeah, that is where the show ends, unfortunately. But I created a little headcanon that this apocalyptic future that Ash just woke up in is actually like a callback to the original ending of Army of Darkness. And people chalk that up to, oh, maybe that was a nightmare Ash had when he was asleep for all those centuries or whatever. But now that the show ends like this, I don't see it as so much as a nightmare as much as of a really deep premonition of what the world would look like if it was consumed by evil. And now that Ash woke up in this apocalyptic future, that is now the reality of the entire situation. It's just a thought. It's just a little headcanon that I came up with. This season and this show is amazing. It is the epitome of what this franchise should be. Really fun action, really fun characters, really fun gore, really fun humor. Overall, this show and this franchise is just really freaking fun. It's not just some surface level splatterfest, and oftentimes it does take time to further build upon lore and characters. One major gripe I have with this season is that Ash, Kelly, and Pablo don't have a ton of screen time together. The three of them together are the best part of the show, but having them separate for about 80% of the time, it was pretty disappointing. Once again, I'm going a bit off script. I just realized this as I'm recording. If you low-key think about it, each season of this show is low-key a thematic parallel to the original trilogy. I mean, the first season and the first movie have this kind of fight for survival type of feel, with Ash bringing together, raising the evil and having to fight his way through to get them, banished from our earthly realm. God, I stutter way too freaking much. The second season and the second movie take a more psychological aspect to it, with... I don't even need to explain it. Season 2 goes into a deep dive in Ash's psyche. We've all seen it, we all know it. And especially in Evil Dead 2, with the Deadites literally just mentally torturing this man. In Season 3 and Army of Darkness basically being this larger, grand-scale battle against the evil. When you think about it like that, this show is way better than I originally thought it was, and I did not think that was possible. So, if you agree or disagree with anything I've said, let me know right down there in the comments below. Also, be sure to like and subscribe to this Darren GNB Productions. And if there's anything to take away from this video and this whole mini marathon altogether, it's that Nether Realm. Put Action Mode Combat 11, goddamn!